Welcome back to Podcast Movement University. I'm Jared Easley. I'm one of the team members with Podcast Movement, and today we're fortunate to have Michael Goodman. He's with CEntrance. And if you've ever been like me, you've probably run into the situation we're going to talk about today, and that's your podcast is stalled. I have lived that. I know what that's like. That is a frustrating place to be. So I'm sure podcasters that are joining us today or watching this after the fact are going to be able to relate to this. So Michael has some fresh ideas on what you can try or what you can apply to your show to mix it up and to hopefully move forward in the right direction. Michael, we are grateful that you're here with us today. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for the invitation. Really looking forward to it. So,
Absolutely. So there's going to be people that are watching that may not be familiar with you or Centrance. I was hoping maybe you could just take a moment and just share a little bit about yourself and what's going on, what you're working on.
yeah, happy to. It's actually, there's a couple of slides on that. Let me bring my microphone a little bit closer because I'm getting an echo from the room. All right, looks better, right? Hopefully sounds better too. Thanks, Jared. Um, well, let's take a look here. So, couple of things about me, and then we'll jump back into the topics. So I am a product design engineer at CEntrance and have been for a long time. Now, hello, 1 2 1 2 1 2. Is my audio okay? 1 2 1 2. Let me know how my audio is. Shannon, how is my audio? Is it better? Sorry about that.
I hear a little crackle, but I think it's okay now. Let's keep going.
Sounds good. Okay, so I'm a product designer and a user experience geek. I love when our customers use our products and enjoy them. And I'm also a jazz musician, so I have a performance experience, and I understand what it is to be on the stage and to be um, working with an audience. So that's a little bit about me. As far as today's presentation, I thought we would talk about three things. Basically, what causes you to pause? And then, if you get stuck, how do you get unstuck faster? And then also, as a bonus, how do you interview people like a pro? I'm not a pro, but I've done this for a while, and I've watched some heroes of mine. A lot of folks from NPR. I'm an NPR geek, so maybe we can talk about some advice on that. So we can just jump right in. Um, let's see. Just a couple of things about our company. So we make a premium compact audio gear that moves your soul as you move about your day. We make things that travel with the person. A whole bunch of our customers are voiceover artists, guys who narrate for a living. Great job if you can find employment there. It used to be even more lucrative, less so now, but still quite an interesting profession. And we just happened to, let's see, my audio is grainy, they are saying to me right now. I don't know what I can do to fix that. I suppose I can log in back. Would that help? I can continue and you let me know in the chat.
Yeah, sure, Michael. Whatever you think would help, we can try it.
Let me just reload the page then. I'll be
Yeah,
right
no
back.
worries. For everybody watching, we have Michael Goodman here today with Centrance, and he's talking about how if your podcast is stalled, basically, what are some ideas? What are some ways to work with that? And so we've noticed that his audio is a little bit less than ideal. So he's going to reconnect, and hopefully we can fix that problem real quickly. But if you like to, you can jump in the chat there wherever you're watching. You can share your name and where you're from. We'd love to hear from you. I know Michael would love to see that you're a part of this today. So we also have a couple of PMU presentations that are going to be coming up in the near future. One of them is Dynamic Ad Insertion 101. That's with Scott St. Pierre from monetizemyshow.com. That's on Wednesday, May 25th at 12 p.m. Central, 1 p.m. Eastern. So definitely excited to be back bringing live presentations with Podcast Movement University. So I think Michael's getting set up here, so he should be right back with us. Of course, and
Hi.
there he is.
Sorry
Hey,
about the small
Michael.
snag. How's the sound now?
That sounds much better. We're going to let you just
Good.
jump right back in.
Yeah, sure. Happy to do that. So we worked with a lot of voiceover artists and formed a lot of great relationships with the folk. They are kind of like podcasters, but they basically read a page of text and make a lot of money. Great job. And so we've learned what they do on a daily basis. For them, immediacy is very important. They need to be able to get their job done fast. Oftentimes, as they travel, the joke is, my Mercedes is my recording studio, simply because sometimes they just get a notification on their phone and they have to pull over to the side of the road, quickly narrate a 30-second spot, and off they go. And then the check is in the mail. So we've learned a lot about their process and how do you record audio quickly. But today we're not talking about that specifically. Basically, as I just mentioned, we had demand in radio, and I started podcasting in 2018. So we've sold our products to radio stations, voiceover guys, journalists, interview professionals, and I started my podcast to essentially talk the walk as opposed to walk the talk, and demonstrate to our customers that, even I can podcast. So let's see what we have in store here for you. All right. I am assuming today, and by the way, hi to everybody. I don't think I officially said hi to the audience, and I'm sorry about that, but now we've said hello. I am assuming that we have an intermediate audience. What does it mean? Well, the general mechanics are probably out of the way. Production, hosting, website stuff. You probably have already handled that. We could talk about it if you have any questions later on, but I will be focusing on continuity, essentially, of the podcast. How to keep the momentum going, how to crack through those initial episodes and get into the groove of the podcast. And then also not part of today's conversation is the monetization and all the other stuff that has connections to marketing, audience management, multi-platform, broadcast, etc. So that's also a different talk. Just to set the focus here. So we want to talk about finding your passion, right? What drives you to share? Defining your niche. What is your area of expertise? And then determining your voice. Do you go professional? Do you go relaxed? Etc. I think those things are important in order to understand where you want to look in terms of finding that drive, right, for your podcast. And you'll see that there's some pointers here, hopefully, that will be useful in getting reoriented, at what you want to do and why you started this originally in the first place. So you're not alone. If your podcast is stuck, there's a lot of other people in the same boat, essentially. There are 2 million podcasts officially registered. This is recent data, 2001. But 26% have published one episode, which is quite interesting statistic. 37% published 2 or fewer episodes, and very few published, a lot of episodes. There's a different statistic here from a different spot. 44% of all podcasts, this is the most important thing in a third line here, have 3 or fewer episodes. So a lot of people start, but they don't finish. They somehow lose the momentum. They lose the drive as they move through the process here. So why does that happen? Well, before we get there, I want to say that podcasting is a long game. You want to create something that is consistent, something that is regular. My favorite quote from Woody Allen is 70% of success is showing up. Sometimes you show up and you're not ready, but the fact that you're there makes all the difference in the world. The fact that you're doing it, even though you might have doubt, even though you might not be exactly sure what you're doing it. And that's most important. YouTubers, interestingly, suggest that putting out at least 20 videos is important before you even find your voice, before you even know what your persona, online persona is, which is useful in knowing that you shouldn't be expecting instant gratification with this vocation. And if you don't expect instant gratification, you're not going to be instantly disappointed. Unfortunately, it's not a get-rich-quick scheme, but gratification comes from having a body of work that you have developed and it is actually starting to move you forward once it's there. So it's kind of a long game engagement. Let's move forward here. So let's talk about the passion, niche, and voice. They're all kind of similar, but I would like to make a distinction, right? Passion, I feel, it's your purpose, right? It's your drive. It's why you're doing this. Your niche, on the other hand, is what you're good at. If you're familiar with the marketing guru Seth Godin, he says that 10,000 hours is what you need to put in to your chosen profession in order to become an expert, right? The Beatles put in their 10,000 hours. Anybody else who's really good and really well known has definitely put in that time. So you obviously have a niche because you're podcasting in that space, and you obviously have a passion, right? The voice is the third part of the equation here, and it's basically how do you deliver your passion to your niche. So you could be passionate about a product or service, like myself, for example. You could have an urge for customer satisfaction. You could have a passion for people or a passion for solving a particular problem. It's important to find that and then to put it on the correct rails. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. What happens to me when I look for that and when I talk about other people is quiet. The proverbial, sitting on the rock next to a lake. We have a lake here in Chicago. Sometimes in the summer you can do it. There's only 1 or 2 months in the year when you can actually sit on a rock near Lake Michigan. But it's a nice contemplative time. So quiet the mind to listen, and what that delivers, it gives you a happier existence, more fulfillment, more self-expression. When you can understand what really drives you in life, I recommend that you think about it. If it's not clear to you yet, I recommend that you write it down. I have to write it down for myself. I refer to those notes later. It is like your true north, right? It is what brings you back to life. It's like when things are not going well, when life is in a disarray and you might be overwhelmed, there must be something that happens that is that one pill, quote unquote, a mental pill that will bring you back to life. It's important to know what that is. So why do we pause, right? I kind of mentioned the overwhelm, but there's other things that are most frequently cited. There's the perfectionism. There's the self-doubt. And then some people are uncomfortable being authentic. Drive is not strong enough, and then they have overwhelm. Now, another quick little pause. I'm being told that the audio issue is back, and they're saying, not sure how we can solve it. So I'm hoping that the audio is okay or it's getting better. If it becomes problematic again, I will simply reconnect. So how do we deal with perfectionism, self-doubt, and discomfort of being authentic? I love this quote. Perfectionism is frustration. Don't fret over it. Just do it. In video, and I publish podcasts in audio and in video, I found over trial and error that fast cuts are totally okay. For a long time, I tried to edit all my videos so that the cuts were really, really nice and smooth, and that you couldn't see any jerky action on the screen. And then, you know what? I said, forget about it. I saw so many videos where it's clearly been cut because the person had an or an and they had to cut that out. It looks okay. It doesn't really matter. For a perfectionist myself, I've learned to overcome that expectation that everything needs to be perfect. Quantity is the quality of its own. Now, that's a quote from Joseph Stalin, probably not the most popular person in the world. But historians note that he essentially did a lot to overcome lower technical competency of his army, etc., by just simply throwing people at the problem. Now, I'm not advocating any of that. That's not the purpose of this conversation. What I'm saying is, do make more podcasts, and then the quantity of the podcasts will translate into the quality of the podcast. That's an important little tidbit here. So you are unique and valuable, and you wouldn't be put on this earth for nothing. I have a lot of musician friends, and they all say that overcoming self-doubt is one of the first things that a musician has to do before they go live on stage, right? We all have the self-doubt. But you know what? Nobody, or let's say the universe, wouldn't place you here if you didn't have a message to tell. And in a philosophical sense, you might need to discover that message, and then it will open you up. It'll give you the power to drop the self-doubt and all that, right? If your words change one life, if you say something, you just say something that's very authentic, and it changes one life, isn't it worth it? So haters are gonna hate, and it's totally not about them. Quick little anecdote. I had a teacher in college, Malcolm Chisholm, in Columbia College, Chicago. Now, Malcolm was a sound engineer, recording engineer. I ran a recording studio for a while. Malcolm is known for recording a Chuck Berry record that was put into space, sent into space on the Voyager spaceship, which essentially has a time capsule of the best of Earth, right? So they took some paintings, they took a music record that Malcolm recorded, and some other things, and it's now traveling in space. It's very hard to catch those guys. So anything that he said, I kind of took very much with interest. So he said, no matter how good you are, somebody out there will still hate your work, right? And it's interesting because that kind of relaxes you, knowing that there's no way, no level of perfection that you can have that will get you to the point when nobody hates you, right? And it just kind of allows you to be okay with it. Haters gonna hate, that's fine. Own your awesome. That's another little tidbit, another little phrase that I really like. Don't be your worst critic. Overcome self-doubt before you worry about outside rejection, right? Then another thing that works for me is speaking simply. I do have a higher education degree, and then sometimes I really, because I'm an engineer, sometimes I really want to complicate things, and I constantly find myself slapping myself on the hand and saying, no, 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 no. Please, simple phrases, interesting. Keep it interesting and not complex, right? Make the time. Have a clear head. Coffee works for me. Clear environment, clear the squirrels, right? The proverbial squirrel, which is basically any kind of a distraction that takes your mind off of something. Plan the talk. Those things really help center you and bring you back to where you need to be to focus, concentrate, and deliver that podcast or that piece of content that you're trying to create. This may be obvious to some people, may not be obvious to others. Authenticity and reciprocity. So I found that people really connect with vulnerability. When I try to put up a wall, kind of I'm guarded, right? I don't sound authentic, and it does not connect with the audience. I can sort of kind of see people nodding off and just going away, disconnecting from the conversation. Sometimes I have members of our studio audience sitting in. It's interesting to see their reactions, right? When you share an authentic story, people wake up, people connect, people pay attention. This bit about vulnerability is so important because if you open up, you will immediately connect. If you have trouble connecting with your audience, consider sharing something about you that is making you uncomfortable slightly, because it's something that you don't want to talk about. But if you make a story out of it, like the David versus Goliath type of story, right? A hero overcomes a villain type of situation. If you can change it into that metaphor, it will immediately connect with your audience, and it will give you the power to move forward, which is amazing. I always have to remind myself that you have no idea how many people you're helping by being honest. I've gotten a lot of customers telling me that something I said changed their perspective, right? I don't say anything important ever, I don't think. But if I get that feedback, it gives me the power to keep going. It's important. So how do you get unstuck faster? Couple of rules that have worked for me. First of all, the inventory of distractions is a tool that I learned from a productivity coach years ago. If you feel overwhelmed, if you feel like, oh my God, I just don't have the time right now. I would really love to continue podcasting or anything for that matter, but I just don't have the time. Sometimes, more often than not, it is something that is in your mind that is in the subconscious level, right? There is some unfinished business that is kind of bugging you, and it may not be obvious what it is. The inventory of distractions is a tool that basically says, all right, sit down with a clean sheet of paper and write down all of the things that are bothering you right now. Just try to think everything that's bothering you right now. Just write them down. An amazing thing happens when you commit your problems to a sheet of paper. They disappear. I don't know how it works, but it does work that way. For some reason, we trust the paper more than we trust ourselves sometimes. Once you have that list, you develop clarity. It's like a load off your shoulders, right? It happens to me every time. Happened for many, many years that I've been using this technique. Once I take all of the things, the garbage needs to be taken out, and all the little things that I emailed that, oh my God, I had to talk to this person, I forgot to make that phone call, right? Once I put all of that down, suddenly I'm freer and I can do stuff and I have that power. So very important. The examples of distractions are, noise, your equipment setup, writer's block, etc. Those things can disappear pretty quickly once you write them down. Now, here's an interesting psychological trick about habit formation. It's psychological, but it's also physiological. So, habit forms after 66 days. And this is a scientific fact. It's proven. Now, how does a habit form? It doesn't really matter what habit we're talking about. But basically, there are two areas in the human brain. One is the prefrontal cortex. That's the modern brain, the brain that is actually doing the thinking. Animals have that, but to a much lesser extent than humans. This is the part of the brain that is responsible for planning and daily activity and new things, learning new things. The basal ganglia is a part of the brain that's more of the older brain. It's located in the back. And that's the brain that is really good at doing repetitive things that you've done before. When you learn a new skill, here's what happens. The control over your actions originates in your modern brain because it is that brain learns the action for the first time. And then eventually, once you've done the action enough times, it moves to the older brain where it then starts to reside. For example, if you practice martial arts or riding a bicycle or driving a car, for that matter, initially it's very hard and very energy intensive, right? You get tired really quickly. Eventually, once you've done it so many times, it moves to a different level and a different part of the brain starts controlling it. Interestingly enough, the modern brain, the front part of the brain, needs a lot more calories to operate than the older brain, the animal brain that we all have, which is much more efficient. So once you've learned a task, you actually require less calories, fewer calories to maintain the task, which is amazing. It blew my mind when I learned that. This is why a truck driver, for example, can be driving for 8 hours straight and not get tired, right? If you can remember to the day when you learned how to drive the car, right? Maybe 20 minutes into it, you were hungry, you were tired, you were ready to go to sleep. That's just because you haven't learned it yet. So 66 days, essentially 66 times you have to repeat something in order for it to become a habit, in order for it to just basically just change the location in the brain from which the actions originate. So that's a scientific fact. Do you have to do 66 podcasts? Maybe. Hopefully fewer. It's an average, right? It could be as quick as 20, or it can be as long as 100 times that you repeat the same action. But once you repeat it enough, rest assured it will get better, just simply by the rules of physiology. So I kind of like that analogy. And every time I don't want to do something, I just remind myself that I only have so many more times to go for the habit to form. And then another thing that kind of helps me is reminding myself that, I'm already an authority on something. And so are you, right? You know something. You are known for something, right? What is it? Are you aware of it? Do you know what it is? Own it. Like, own your awesome. Really love that phrase. And then once you know it, share it. Don't be stingy. Because somebody else needs you. They need your voice. They need your knowledge. It's important. I realized when I was about 15, 16, that my purpose in life is to make gear for music recording and playback. And kind of never veered away from that path, even though music is not the most lucrative of areas. And even I sometimes lose momentum, even though I live off of passion. Pretty much every day I wake up passionate about my work, which I would say is a gift. And that's probably different for a lot of people. I realize that. But I also lose momentum. And then what I do is, what always brings me back is good music. So I would catch a live show, jazz show, or I simply just put on some favorite music of mine. I make the time to do that. So that's almost like therapy, right? And about 20 minutes in, I'm back, ready to work with full power. So do you have something like that works for you? What is it that works for you? Can you reliably go back to this particular experience that brings you back to full power? It's important to know that, right? All right, let's finish up by talking about interview tips. You can't talk all the time. It's more fun and also easier to get guests to come to your program. So I've interviewed a lot of musicians, a lot of audio industry professionals, people who have done sound for Star Wars, people who have played with Frank Zappa, people who have defined like the important periods in American music. And then they say that music is still like the biggest American export all over the world. So it's interesting that your guests can actually keep you going. Who are the 5 people in your industry who you have a friendly relationship with? You can invite them today. You can just call them up and say, hey, do you want to be on my podcast? Most likely they will say yes. It's amazing that, well, it's not obvious initially, but it's true. People love to talk about themselves. People love to talk about their accomplishments. Once I started asking people, I was surprised with how many yeses I got for essentially in inviting people to my podcast. Everybody wants to talk about themselves. And one important thing that you can do when you're interviewing them is let them talk. So, and we'll talk about that in a second, shutting up is one of the most important skills when interviewing somebody. So how does a guest keep you going, keep you accountable? Well, you schedule the time with them, right? And then that time on the schedule kind of puts the pressure on you to make sure that it happens, right? You clear your schedule and you record that podcast with them. How do you eat the elephant? Step by step, right? Start now. And it doesn't really matter how many dates you've missed before. The past doesn't matter. What really matters is the future. So never too late to start. Or restart, for that matter, if you started and then paused. So how do you interview? I try to keep the humor light, and I did study at Second City, but it's hard to develop good humor on a consistent basis. I mean, you have to be a humor writer in order to produce humor consistently. So you got to start with some joke, but other than that, just shut up. And it's better than cracking a joke because you don't want to interrupt your guest. The worst thing you can do is interrupt the guest when they're about to say something really important. Let them talk. And then when you're done, close respectfully, and then try to sell your guests, try to big them up, try to make them important, and explain to your user why the guest is there and what their value is, right? So those things work well for me. I also formulate a couple of questions. This is not on the slide, but I also formulate a couple of questions that I try to research that have not been asked of this guest, right? So I look through their other interviews that they've done in the industry or in the press, and I try to come up with something that is new, something that really has not been asked before. So that has helped. When somebody says, "Oh my God, nobody has asked me that question before," that feels nice. That's a good feeling. Okay, how long should your podcast be? Because that's another issue that sometimes gets people to slow down or pause because they think, "Oh my God, this is overwhelming. I'm not going to be able to produce 30 minutes of content or an hour of content." Right? Some people can talk forever, and other people can't. We have a video series which is called Audio Minute. It's like 1 minute long videos. So we take a topic and we condense it to 1 minute, and they're all 1 minute, and they're on YouTube. Very hard to edit, but you can encapsulate some bit of wisdom into 1 minute, and that's really cool, and it's also very consumable. So there's nothing wrong with something that's 1 minute long. You can actually make a little tidbit and publish it, so it doesn't have to be 30 minutes. Now, we do have 30-minute videos and 20-minute videos where there's something to talk about. Obviously, we'd put that content out. But obviously, with videos, it's easier to do short stuff. With podcasts typically are longer because people can listen to them as they're doing things, as they're doing chores around the house, as they're mowing the lawn, etc. Can't do that with video. But don't be concerned that you have to produce a certain length. It's okay to go short. If you don't have a lot of content, it's more important to release that podcast than to wait until you have collected enough material to make it long. And then inspiration. I love Terry Gross on NPR. She does an interview with somebody famous every day in the afternoon. And her interviews are profound. She is a great listener. She very hardly talks. I mean, she does talk, but mostly to summarize the book or the movie that her guest has just put out. And then she asks a quick pointed question and that lets the guest talk. So I think that that's a great skill to learn from her. Ira Glass has joked that his program on NPR also is called This American Life, if you don't know, and he's had it for like 20 years or more. He's joked that he has pretty much invented podcasts before they were invented, which may be true. He has been perfecting the art form for a very long time. Even though you can argue that podcasts have been around for longer than that. I think we're coming up on the 100th anniversary of a radio format called radio drama or radio theater. The first radio theater was recorded in 1924. Radio theater was extremely popular in the 1950s, and you can still catch reruns on AM radio. I love the format. It's basically it's a podcast with a lot of actors, except they talk kind of funny. There has to be a particular radio voice that is engaged during the production of the radio theater. We don't do that anymore, thankfully. Gary Vee. Gary Vee is a great marketing leader who was able to inspire me more than once about the need to get your voice out there. So we have a brand, and so we're an organization, we're a business, and we talk about our products, but more often than not, we talk about our customers and we talk about their lives. Not so much about sales or specific features of the product. Try not to do that as much, because what we try to deliver is authentic, free advice that will hopefully resonate with people. And whether or not that translates into sales, that's really secondary. It's an important mindset that has to be assumed, that you are really doing a service to your audience. Your audience needs to get something for free from you, and then it will be valuable. Not necessarily, it's not a transaction. I'm not looking at this transactionally at all. And that's what Gary Vee tries to advocate. And of course, Joe Rogan is the most famous podcaster of all time. He's a master of the interview. Like him or not, there's a lot you can learn from Joe. Um, and then so therefore I do recommend to look at him or to listen to him. That basically kind of brings us to the end of the presentation. Now I have additional slides that might help answer any questions that I've been sort of anticipating. But we've talked about, talking for about 35 minutes and then maybe leaving 10 minutes or 5-10 minutes for questions. If anybody has any questions, happy to take them. So the floor is yours, Jared.
Well, Michael, we have one attendee. Her name is Susie, and she's in the UK, and she's entertaining different possibilities about starting a podcast. And basically, she wrote in here she has a few ideas. She would maybe have some guests, and she's just trying to kind of sort through what to do, and she's maybe procrastinated a little bit. She's admitted. So, Michael, what do you suggest? You kind of touched on this, but what do you suggest to somebody who's wanting to get started? What are a couple of things they need to keep in mind?
Right. I assume that Susie knows what she wants to talk about. If she does, I would.
I think she's still determining what that could be. So maybe we could touch on that too.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm sure Susie is passionate about something, right? There is something in life that she really likes and she really enjoys. That may be, something to look into for the subject of the podcast. There might be something that drives her, right? Something that she really is inspired by. People start in one area and then they transition to another area. People start talking about movies and then they transition to talking about sports, right? Because they realize that they might like both movies and sports, but then they find that the sports drives them harder. It's a bigger interest, more passion. They can talk about it for longer. Does Susie like to talk? Right? Is she a kind of person who would prefer to be shy or would readily speak about something? One thing that can really help is actually source your content through your guests. So talk less, ask questions, and have them talk. So if you have a couple of people that you think might be helpful, or you know that they're experts in their field, doesn't even matter what field they're in, right? Just getting them to talk on record, essentially just push the record button, and just create a mock interview for fun. You don't have to publish it. Create a mock interview with somebody and then see where the conversation goes. I was at a trade show recently. It was very noisy. Guy came up. He wanted to listen to our headphones. And I realized in the process of conversation that he is a coffee enthusiast and he has a coffee podcast. So he talks about coffee all day long. And I also love coffee. So I had my recorder with me. I turned it on and I immediately recorded like a 5-minute conversation with him. We talked about a lot of different things, but it was fun because it got us both engaged. We both laughed a lot, so we had a good time during that exchange. I don't care what you talk about. You can talk about coffee, you can talk about gardening, you can talk about movies. But I think starting with anything, it really doesn't matter what you start with. You can describe your kitchen for like it, right? What kind of foods you like. That might be a way to get into it, and then what you'll find in the process is you will start understanding that, okay, well, that might be a topic to research some more. That may be something to look into. I don't know if that's helping. Hopefully it does. It is.
I think that's helpful. And what's really cool is I don't know if you're able to see this, Michael, but there's other folks that are in the chat that are giving advice to Susie. So it's not only is she getting your expertise, she's also getting some wisdom from some others. So it's really nice that we can do that. You mentioned that you have some of these other slides. Is that something you want to take a look at for a little bit, or?
Yeah, well, yeah, I should have been reading these comments. Interesting.
Well, there's quite a few of them now, but yeah.
Let's see now. Yeah. Hold on. Let me just look at it real quick. Yeah, nice. Um, so other slides, yeah. Well, a lot of people ask us if they should use a USB mic or an audio interface. That's actually an area of expertise of ours on the technical side, and we found that USB mics are very quick and easy to use. They are simpler, right? But we've also found that they're noisier. So a professional voiceover actor would typically not use a USB mic. They would use a higher quality professional broadcast mic and an audio interface. Now, depending on whether you only plan to record in your studio or home studio, or if you also travel, and we deal with a lot of people who haven't traveled, these voiceover guys, because they can now have these portable setups, right? They don't really care where they work, so they always work remotely because they might be vacationing in Italy, and they could be narrating that spot from anywhere they are. So an interface with a good mic is a recommendation for somebody who's transitioning from just a beginner level to like intermediate level or professional level, because it gives you higher quality sound, it gives you less noise, and it gives you additional flexibility that you might not have with a USB mic. But nothing wrong with starting with the USB mic. There's a lot of them out there, and they're not expensive at all. So it's an easy way into the profession. Now, we make a couple of products. One is called MicPort Pro, in short, MPP, and Portcaster, which I showed a little bit earlier. And they're good for that because they have a battery and they're bulletproof. I can scroll to that slide. They're easy to use, and they deliver that radio station quality. We have French radio buying them, Swedish radio, big radio stations. NPR has a lot of these. So this is a Portcaster here, and it's a handheld recorder. It's pretty. Actually, using one right now. I don't know if I can send. Yeah, there it is. That has two channels, so you can interview your guest. You can be on one channel and have a guest on the other channel. It also has a recorder built in on the back, so you can actually print your podcast into a little SD card for redundancy reasons, as well as at the same time, if you connect it to via USB to a computer or to a phone, you can record to a computer or phone, or you can live stream. So we have a lot of folks also who live stream their shows. So the phone might be used for live streaming, and then the SD card is used to record that same program for reference or for redundancy reasons, etc. These things are battery powered. Again, they're small, and they can go with you anywhere you want to go. Now let's see, what else do I have here for question and answer, as I'm also trying to look at all these questions. Thank you for all of that. Yes, it's okay if your podcast is not ideal at first, but then it gets to improve. Of course it does. Yes.
I actually put a link there, Michael, for people to check out the Portcaster.
Oh, thank you so much.
So they can have a look if that's something that interests them, and I think it should. I think being able to have the flexibility of recording in person, and when you're at an event or you're sitting down with someone is just a really cool opportunity, and I've taken advantage of that many times, and I've been able to have some of the better episodes of my personal podcast, being able to have the flexibility of doing a recording that just right there in person.
That product came out of another product called MixerFace, which was a music recording device that we made. And we had requests from radio station folks for like a limiter and then some other things that would be better for a radio audience. And one of the musicians who actually used the Portcaster to premiere it was, and I was surprised, was George Clinton from Parliament Funkadelic.
Wow.
Who is not just a musician, but is also quite good painter, as it turns out. And he now does a lot of work presenting his paintings in galleries, right? And when he does a talk, he usually uses a Portcaster, which feels nice, of course. Let's see. doable.
Well, I tell you what,
Absolutely.
Michael, since it looks like we're kind of reaching the end of the set presentation, and I'm sure we're going to have some more questions as people get a chance to process this more. Let's talk about the about you or how people can connect with you. What's the best way for people who may have questions and they want to reach out? What's a good way for them to contact you online?
Yeah, thank you. Would be happy to talk more about this. Again, I believe in learning, and I will never know anything, or will never know everything. But happy to give advice at any point. So you can. The easiest way to contact with us, with me directly, is through the website. So you go to centrance.com, and then if you scroll down to the bottom of the page, it's going to be a little box in which you can send an email. That comes right to me. It's probably the easiest way to do it. And then ask any questions. Say that you liked it. Say that you didn't like something. I'm very much interested in your feedback. So would be happy to engage in a conversation. And then if you have any questions about our products, obviously happy to discuss that as well.
Well, I really appreciate that, Michael. As we start to close out here, what is some final thoughts that you have to share regarding just getting unstuck and moving on, moving forward with your podcast?
Um, let's see. What helps me is doing it when I don't want to do it. Out of spite, out of commitment, out of creating a challenge with somebody else. The people do these weight challenges where when they ask their friend to help them, encourage them to do something, right? Um, if you can find people who are like-minded, and this is where podcast movement is really awesome with their meets. You can talk to people at these meets who are dealing with the same stuff that you are dealing, right? They're trying to do a podcast, and maybe they already have a podcast, and they've gone through a lot of these questions already. They can answer some of your questions real quick. I just attended one at the National Association of Broadcasters show in Las Vegas. A lot of folks who I really enjoyed talking to who are very much like me in that sense, right? Connecting to like-minded people solves a lot of problems, helps you crack through a lot of these inhibitions. So I would really recommend that. I think that's a great thing to do.
Well, Michael, we absolutely appreciate your time. Thank you so much. And again, everyone that is interested in learning more about some of the different devices and or they want to reach out to Michael, you can go to centrance.com. I would put that link in the comments there. Michael, again, we appreciate your time today, and thank you so much for helping us.
Thank you, Jared. Really enjoyed it.